In this video, I'll be showing you how to export a model from 3dsMax to Unreal 4 three different ways. The first will be exporting a model in parts. The second is exporting multiple parts as a single mesh, and the third is exporting that single mesh with a multi-subobject material. So let's get started. Let's go to our Create panel and click on a box and create some boxes. And I do have auto grid turned on just so that I can draw boxes on top of boxes. Alright, so if we wanted to, at this point, we could just export this model right now. And in fact, this is how you would export a model just in parts, is by keeping all of these boxes as their own separate objects in the world. So you can just select all of them, go to export, export selected. Do note that it is important to click on export selected, especially if you have a bunch of other things in your scene, because if you only click export, it'll export everything in the scene. So go to export selected, and I'm just going to name these test box 1 in a test folder I've already created. And in your FBX settings, make sure that you have smoothing groups, triangulate, and preserve edge orientation checked, while unchecking animation, because these are static meshes, animation is useless. And under axis conversion, make sure your up axis is Z up, because whenever 3dsMax goes to Unreal, Z up makes sure that the orientation of your model is correct, and so it's not tilted in any way. And go ahead and click OK. And now let's jump over to Unreal in just a little test scene here, and let's create a folder called test box 1 and drag test box 1 in. Go ahead and click on import. And you'll see that we have 3 meshes, and they are 3 different boxes. And you'll notice these are the 3 boxes that made up our pyramid in Max. And this is how you would export multiple meshes and just keep them as multiple meshes. But if you have a complex model that's made up of different pieces, you'll usually want to attach them, and so that you can export to Unreal and have one cohesive mesh to work with. So in order to do that, all you have to do is click on your base mesh, go to modify, and right click here, turn this into an editable poly, click on the attach button, and attach the 2 other meshes. Right click to stop attach mode. And one other thing to note here is that whenever we're exporting, we want our pivot point to be at our 0 location, so that we want our model to be at the 0 location, so that whenever it goes to Unreal, our axis doesn't get moved around at all. So let's go ahead and right click these arrows down here, and that'll center our model in the world. So let's go to export selected once again, make this test box 2, keep all the same settings, back to Unreal, and I'm going to just import this on our base folder here. Click on import, and you'll see the difference here. Whenever we drag this in, all of our boxes are together as one cohesive mesh. And one other thing to note is if we double click on this, we see that we only have one material slot here, which means that if we want different materials on different boxes, it's not going to work, because if we try to assign a material here, a clay material, for instance, it applies it to all the boxes. So there are a lot of scenarios where you want a static mesh, and this works for skeletal meshes too even. You may want a static mesh where you have multiple materials applied to different places, but you still want to be able to work with one mesh. So in order to do that, go back to 3dsMax and go to your element tab and click on the first element you want to designate here. Go to Polygon Material IDs, set that to 1. And these material IDs are basically specifying which pieces of your object are going to have the same materials. So we have our bottom piece with our first material, our second piece, which we can put as 2, and our third piece, which we can designate as 3. And it's almost ready to go. But Unreal can't quite recognize those material IDs yet. First you have to press M, drag in a multi-subobject material, double click it, and use these add and delete buttons so that you can use the add and delete buttons to either add more material IDs for your object or delete some. And in this case we only need 3 because we only have 3 IDs that we just assigned. So go ahead and drag this onto your model, and it turns black just because there are no materials applied to this, but that doesn't matter because since we're taking it to Unreal, it doesn't matter how it looks here in Max. So go ahead, exit out of that, again, export, selected, and we will name this testbox 3. Again, with the same settings. Back to Unreal, and I am going to create a folder for this one. Testbox 3, because this one is going to bring in a couple extra things. So let's go ahead and import. And you'll notice that this box, it is, if we drag it in World, it is a completely black box, just like in Max. And it has generated these 3 materials for us here, which you may want to keep. For instance, if we edit one material here, we can change it to red. And now we have red here. So these materials just come pre-assigned. In most cases, I just delete these because I already have pre-made materials that I already want to specifically assign to things. So it's totally fine to just delete those. And just hit no on that. And so now with testbox 3, if we double click it, you will notice that we have 3 material slots here, as opposed to testbox 2, which only had 1. So now we can go to testbox 3. In our first material slot, we can apply our brick texture. In our second, we can apply a cobblestone. And in our third, we can apply some grimy concrete. And that is how you would keep one static cohesive mesh while still being able to assign different materials to different parts. And one more thing is that whenever this method in 3dsMax of attaching things together is a really great way to give your model to another person on the team or a friend or someone, because the FBX isn't trying to manage a bunch of separate meshes. Whenever you attach them together and then export as an FBX, it only has one mesh, so it's like less confusion, because I've sometimes ran into those issues. So by attaching things as one mesh, it can also help to fix some bugs just whenever you give stuff to your friend. So hopefully that helped, and have a nice day.